And the good news is that the tussle between renewables and fossil-based grids is not relevant for this session because energy efficiency is fine with both, and it will work well with both. So it's important, and it's often referred to as the most efficient form of power, because if you look at global projections, the amount of energy that can be saved from energy efficiency in terms of graphical projections is way more than all the other benefits. So we are going to start with a brief presentation by Nomer, and then I'll invite some of the panelists to give their inputs, and then we can have a discussion.
Thank you, Ali Saab. So, from this presentation, please do not expect some mind blowing solutions. This presentation is there to set up the context, to lay out the landscape, to tell what has been happening, what is there, and then for the solutions and the challenges, we put the burden on the discussants. So we'll get the feedback on the things that are not working well with the existing plans. So the problem is very clear, that almost all of Pakistan's sectors are very energy inefficient. Transport, for example, takes up the 34% of total energy consumption in Pakistan. It's also one of the largest contributors to air pollution. With the climate change, there are new challenges on board. So our population is becoming increasingly vulnerable, and we're also failing to tackle all the emissions that are coming out. So more than 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions in Pakistan come out of the energy sector. And therefore, energy efficiency and conservation is one of the most pertinent topics at the moment. We are also struggling with our current account deficits and extremely high import bills, which directly relate with our inefficient energy sector. And then it results in high cost of doing business and lack of export competitiveness. The reasons are clear. We have obsolete technologies. There is lack of investment in the sector. The private sector does not have the incentive to upgrade, to adjust, and take up all the recommendations that NICA or PICA is providing. We have a lot of wastage in the supply chain, and we have high energy losses at residential and industrial level. Let's do a small regional comparison. Bangladesh got independent from Pakistan in 1971. Today, Bangladesh uses its energy very smartly compared to Pakistan. So the output per ton of oil equivalent in Bangladesh is $6 million. In Pakistan, that's close to 3. So it's almost double. And Pakistan, after a small analysis, we can say that it has a lot of potential of improvement. It can save up to 15% of its primary energy supply if it changes its systems, conserve the energy, use it smartly. And it has improved in the past. So from 2010 to 2022, the energy efficiency, energy conservation rate has gone up from 2.8 to 3.3 millions per tonnage of oil equivalent. And NICA here is doing a very good job. They've set out very clear guidelines. They have a roadmap. They have a strategic plan that they're following, and they eye that they will reduce, that they'll achieve this 3 million tonnage of oil equivalent by 2025. We'll see what becomes of that. But there are a lot of potential benefits that we can reap from this. We can increase the export competitiveness of our industries, reduce our import bill, reduce the current account deficit, and then become more sustainable. So follow a sustainable growth trajectory at the end. There's also a global drive for becoming more energy efficient and to conserve energy. So it helps with our GSP plus status. Pakistan has this status since the past few years. And in order to to longevate its tenure, we need to keep on improving. Our industries need to improve. Secondly, Pakistan is making this shift to this financial reporting system, which is also very closely linked with our energy efficiency and conservation systems. Thirdly, the carbon border management adjustment system, it's bringing in a tax regime for imports into Europe. And if our exports are producing a lot of carbon, if they are inefficient, we're going to suffer. Other regional countries will go past Pakistan very easily. And lastly, in order to utilize climate finance, efficiency and conservation are the initial steps that we need to take. These are the plans that are already in place. So, as I said, this is the lay of the land. Nika developed this strategic plan in 2020. It's being implemented in phases. We'll go into the detail of this. There's also a sustainable energy plan for Pakistan that talks about how sustainable growth can take place. And thirdly, we have this nationally determined contribution NDC 2021 submitted to the UN. Then we have the cooling action plan, which looks at the refrigerators, air conditioners, and their efficiency. Karachi has a very specific climate action plan, which is under development, and it deals with a lot of challenges that come from climate change. And we have a long-term low emissions development plan that's also under development. We have these ongoing programs and projects that are specifically dealing with some of the sectors. So PICA is looking at these public sector buildings. So, for example, Mayo Hospital in Lahore and GC University, they were given recommendations from PICA to switch their inefficient appliances. Then we have this CLASP energy efficiency program that deals with motors, water heaters, ACs, refrigerators. This has also been done. IFC has produced this resource efficiency for industry, especially the textiles, and have told them how they can become more efficient and how the gains can be made. World Bank has developed this one report where they have identified these 5 sectors in collaboration with NICA, and they've given these specific interventions through which industries can replace their motors, heaters, boilers, all these inefficient parts of the machinery, and it's gonna be published soon, hopefully. So this is NICA's strategy. They started in the first phase with setting up provincial efficiency and conservation authorities. So we have PICA and we have the Sindh Energy Conservation and Efficiency Authority. In the second phase, they set up the minimum energy performance standards, the labeling schemes for different appliances that includes fan and LEDs, the new labeling schemes for refrigerators and air conditioners are under development. They've also it's part of their plan to start the certification of energy auditors and also to make the energy audits mandatory. So this strategic plan is there. It's in the books. It struggles when it comes to the implementation. So most of the discussion in this session will focus on how the implementation challenges and the financing and investment challenges can be dealt with. A small overview of the households. There's rapid urbanization across the urban centers of Pakistan. They're becoming unlivable due to the urban heat island effect, due to climate change. Temperatures are rising. There's a higher need for refrigeration and cooling and ventilation. And also the affordability and reliability of energy is becoming a primary concern because the poor people are the most vulnerable and they cannot afford cooling and refrigeration in their houses. So the work in progress is that there are these building codes that are being amended so that there's better ventilation and there's this green infrastructure that can help deal with climate change. The labeling schemes and the energy performance standards, they're also being developed. They have been developed. They're in the implementation phase for LEDs and fans. Japan is helping with the MEPs for air conditioners and refrigerators. So the landscape looks good. The work is being done. We'll see where the problem is. Maybe sometimes, when it comes to the policymakers, it's not on their top agenda. Energy efficiency and conservation comes slightly lower. Uh, we're also complacent in this because this is the third session and not the first session today. So that kind of gives the same message that maybe Pakistan is prioritizing this, is putting this on a lower priority than the other issues, but it's very important. When it comes to industries, I'm referring to the World Bank report that has been under preparation. There are these priority areas that NICA and the World Bank are working on with specific interventions, highlighting which parts need replacement. So textile, cement, steel, leather, sugar, they're all inefficient at the moment, but with the right changes, with investments, they can become more efficient. And then these are the sectors: so lighting, compressors, motors, these technical things, they need to be updated with time for Pakistan to become more competitive internationally. And then more interventions can be made through energy management systems, through energy audits, through the development of ESCOs, and through financing mechanisms where these businesses can access easy concessional finance to upgrade their technology with time. The areas that require some attention include the transport sector and the power sector. So, transport, as we know, contributes a lot to the greenhouse gas emissions. The fuel standards are not followed, so we have a lot of dirty fuel coming in, smuggled into Pakistan, and then getting burned in our generators and cars. So that is not monitored. There has been talks of setting up these vehicle inspection centers, but they're all still talks. And then the vehicle examination standards also need to be set up so that there is a clear message that these vehicles can run on the road and these ones cannot. The electric vehicle policy came into being a few years back. It has not taken off, so it still struggles. Similarly, the power sector has a challenge where, as was mentioned by Bhutto Saab earlier on, but the demand side load optimization is not taking place. So the government is on the right path, but still hasn't the solution. Still hasn't found the solution to this problem: how the load can be divided and managed well over time. Here are the challenges. So this is where the discussion will happen in this session. The biggest problem is with the implementation. So NICA has done a lot of great work. We're not doing anything new. NICA, World Bank, all these other stakeholders, they've done their duty, but the implementation struggles. The minimum energy performance standards, they're still voluntary. They're not mandatory. So people don't have any incentive at the moment to accept them, to comply to them. The building energy efficiency codes, they're also still on the paper. There's so many buildings, and there's a lot of urbanization, informal urbanization, that's taking place that does not comply to these codes. And lastly, again, fuel is a big problem: dirty fuel all across Pakistan. Jahanzeb Saab in the first session, in the opening remarks, said that yes, investment is the challenge that we need to tackle, because businesses, private sector, they have a natural incentive to upgrade their technology, save their costs, become more competitive, but they don't have that investment. They don't have that concessional finance to upgrade themselves, to improve their technology. And lastly, we're missing out on the awareness. So households, industries, small and medium enterprises, all these different components of the society, they still do not realize, and policymakers also, most importantly, they do not realize that this is a very important subject, and then Pakistan can perform a lot better if it becomes more energy efficient and conserves its energy smartly. So I will leave the presentation here. This is the food for thought. This is where we open up to you guys and ask how we can deal with these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Numair, for setting the stage. Uh, I'd like to request that we structure our session in four parts. The first one is a bit about what plans are in place. Most of them have been covered, so I'll begin with Dr. Mozam for that. So that would be the first part, maybe the brief part. Second part, I'd request that we first just share some of the existing ongoing projects that are in place, any positive initiative, regardless of how small, so that we become familiar with the good things happening. I just give an example. We complain about so much not happening, like EV penetration is very low in Pakistan, but at the same time, 34 companies have been issued licenses to manufacture two-wheel or three-wheel electric vehicles. So, it's an important thing to recognize. So that would be the second part, ongoing projects, and then we can start coming to the gaps and the roles that different organizations can play, government, private sector, other actors, and then finally we can coalesce them into recommendations. So the reason I'm requesting this is that please don't begin with recommendations or problems. First, I'd like to keep it structured. So if someone goes outside this structure, I will stop them. So I'd like to begin with Dr. Mozam because I think we've seen that the plans are in place. So if you want to add anything to your existing plans, like the NICA strategic plan or other plans that are relevant for that, and if there are gaps in plans, and then we'll move to the other section.
Bismillah. Few clarifications on this presentation. Uh, I think the first thing I want to highlight the SMAP data, which shows that in 2019, NICA or energy efficiency in Pakistan was given on this RISE index somewhere around 28 points. And currently we are at 36 points in Pakistan. So I think that is in 2021, we are on these. This is what we say that a third party from the World Bank side, this is what we have achieved. And I still believe that whatever has been reported in that, it's still 2021, because after that there has been a lot of work done, and that is what we have in place. Secondly, I think this strategic plan at that time, when we approved it, it was for 2023, not for the long term. Initial challenge that we faced, I must highlight on this forum, that when we or I took a charge as managing director, because before that it was ad hoc. So though the NICA as authority established in 2016, and I joined as a managing director in November 2019. So before that, there were things on paper, yes, but I think there was some effort going on because there is another Section 42 company as Energy Conservation Fund that was working and that has done some good work. In the absence of leadership, I think they have been doing some good work. Though we can go back into the history of Anarcon and what has been done, I don't want to go into that much details. So I think there are few things which I really want as you structured this session. First and foremost, the strategic plan was for our internal consumption. It was not something that we are going out and doing this thing. I think it was initially like how to take about like the next steps, like how to sort of, if we have just a building with the 30 support staff, no professional, no budget, just a copy of an act. So I think that's how we started this place. Then the question is that we divided this in our strategic plan into three phases. The first, that how we can institutionalize it, because every time we do things and it's go away. Second, or get eroded. The important thing, like first we need to institutionalize all this. Second, how we can operationalize. And the third stage is actually how we can implement it. And I think we divided it in 3 years term, like because my term at that time that I realized like I'm here for 3 years, so I should divide it logically and start working on that. So primarily we started institutionalizing all these things. And I'm very grateful during that time that without any professional support, World Bank was the first one who came forward and extensively supported us. And through, I think they gone all the way in so many ways that it would have not been possible if the World Bank team was not there at that time. So I must appreciate all that work. I think from that time, I can say that now we have National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Policy 2023 approved by the cabinet is available with us. Along with that, we have approved National Action Plan with 29 interventions, and then we have sub interventions along with the timelines available with us, and that has also been approved by the cabinet. I think there is two another aspects which has been mentioned here. We have available with us the Energy Conservation Building Code 2023. That is again, it's a very extensive process. When I'm saying approved by the cabinet, it means there is a lot of work done at right from developing something, consultations, and a lot of debates, discussion, and then you take it all the way after approval from the board to the cabinet, and then you get approved. So we have approved Energy Conservation Building Code with us. And I'm really thankful if GIZ team is sitting here that they have extended their support with a lot of funds and a lot of things that under the Buvende project, we are currently working on it. And I can tell you this very important thing. I think we have Irshad Sab sitting with us from GIZ side, that CDA is in implementation process with us. We have already done extensive work with number of other agencies, and I think currently, as we see as of right now, you will see a major changes going on in the bylaws of the development authorities, local governments, and to that extent, we are coming up very forcefully on that side. Now, the next thing I think I really want to highlight is the Pakistan's electric appliances regulations. And I think there are things missing in this. Especially, we have the regulations for fans, air conditioners, refrigerators, LEDs, and water motors. So all these regulations have been extensively worked out with the support of CLASP, JICA, and other agencies, and that has been again after very extensive work with industrial collaboration, and a lot of this work has been completed, and currently this is also approved by the cabinet and in the implementation stage. I think these are some of these things which, even if I will say ask the World Bank team again and review Pakistan's energy efficiency again, ask the SMEP to do the same review, and you will find us at this time somewhere around 65 or 67 score above many countries in the region. And I think we have achieved all of it in just imagine, like from 2020 till 2024, we have achieved all of this work completed, approved, and currently in implementation stage. I think that is important aspect, like whatever approval we have with us, whatever things we are doing, that is available. I must say that along with that, Jazeb Saab was very supportive in the last PDM stint, and a World Bank project which we worked together for the financing, 150 million US dollar, that was also approved, and also it was approved in the CDWP, and I think it's still somewhere that this funding will be coming for the implementation of some of the initiatives or the programs. So I think all the check boxes, if you ask, especially for first institutionalization approved. Second step, that what we are talking about, like how we are going to operationalize. I think if you ask me, I think that's also where we have crossed that stage as well. Now, I think the next question comes in, like when we are going to sort of see how we can move forward in that direction. And I think Numair has rightly pointed out that what is the strategy or what is the priority for energy efficiency in the country. It's just like a 13 chapter of a book where we have already discussed first, second, and third chapter. And by the time we will reach the 13th chapter, most of the faces I see they are almost sleepy. So imagine that's the priority we have for something, and that's very realistic, because the way we see it, the challenges that we have this big circular debt, we have theft, we have these and these. Now you're asking like energy efficiency, who will listen to this? So I think same sort of problems or challenges you will face at different forums, like how to highlight it, how to sort of come out and again and try to tell this is something very important, we should work on it. But I think recently, whenever there is a hike or surge in a tariff, I think I always come out as a different, a distinct source. Like, oh, there should be something they can offer. I think primarily, then I'm just trying to sort of raise this question, and I already highlighted it for all the policymakers and all what we are doing here. Do we have the right priority? Do we have the right strategy? What are we talking? All what I can see is operational details. And I think someone said the GM from WAPDA can do it. A lot of these details I have been listening across the board. Question is, I just asked my team member, and I think they have done very effective work. We asked, give us like the load curves with the whole power sector. First, there is no integration. When I work with OGRA, I work with NEPRA, I work with the whole petroleum division, I work with the power division, with the industries, with Ministry of Climate Change. When I talk to all of them, I am sitting in the center. And then I mean, by virtue of this organization, because before the session I was with Ministry of Climate Change, were discussing some green hydrogen project for financing for that. So the question is that you talk to industries, because of this whole electric appliances regulations, you talk to the building sector, you talk to different ministries, and then you realize, I think, given in this place, there's no communication going on. There is no sort of integrated policy making. That's what we are saying, like we want to do this, like how to deal with this. I was sort of saying another understanding this perspective, that when we designed the load curves on a daily basis for the whole power sector, we realized that and especially last year's clearly shows us 6,500 megawatts, the lowest demand. And then in all the way in summer, we reached 30,000 megawatts demand. So the question, I think, when we started analyzing, like, what are the components? Asad Saab is sitting with us. He always say and guide us a lot on Sankey diagram. And we were doing the same, like, let's look into these aspects, like from the demand standpoint of view, where is this major chunk is going? And I think when we started looking in all of these data, the first question was, we are just preparing all our power sector for 86 days of summer. And 3,000 or maybe some of these data that is available is for number of few hours that we use these power plants. I mean, what is the approach we are taking for our energy sector? That's the major question. 30,000, 6,000 to 30,000, or maybe 10,000 to 30,000. Where this 20,000 comes in? So when we looked into the data, we were very surprised that after me, if I take 10,000, 12,000 is a base load, the remaining part goes to this whole cooling thing. And I think 2017 research from UC Berkeley shows this, that this climate change or the heating pattern moving from south to north, this exactly indicated that by 2021, 2023, major addition, whatever we are going, adding into the system, all will be going through for the cooling, either for fan, air conditioner, refrigerators. And that exactly what is happening, and the future will be the same. So the question is, why we are doing all this capacity addition? And I think then we looked into this whole aspects, like that air conditioners and the refrigerators and the fans, and more than 10,000 goes to the fan. A very simple thing, that this goes to the fan. So the priority then we already have in place this whole cooling action plan. Means Samavati and other organized class was working with us on that. But I think once I started going back to the industry and I asked, like, let's switch because we have these regulations approved and we should start working on it. I think the primarily the same challenge why we should shift. And the people are so powerful that whenever we go to change it, get approved, they get extension. And I think then we decided let's change it other way around. And this is the first time we thought, okay, we proposed that we want to bring in the fan replacement program that will create this much of demand and save you this and this. And I think now there is a buy-in. Everybody's interested, and now I have. I think this is not on paper. This is actual happening right now. That I have a lot of applications waiting for approval. That the fan manufacturers, LED manufacturers, air conditioners, refrigerators, motors manufacturers are waiting for our approval to come on this regime and prepare these appliances for the future. One. So I think that the right kind of incentive was definitely needed. Second, I think that a major challenge again goes back. Do I need a new power plant? I think that is a question mark for all of us. Do we need, irrespective of solar, wind, or coal? I'm not asking for that. But do we need more power? When your winter goes to 6,500 or maybe 10, 12,000. So, and then all the way you jump to the summer for few days for 30,000. Do we need that much of capacity payments? So, I think understanding that aspect, like what can be done, and do we have to deal with this, like adding new power plants with this whole equity and debts and all these kind of challenges. I think when we looked into it, like why people are using so much cooling, means that's a very simple thing because we don't have insulation in the buildings. All the building sector is there with a very bad design, with no efficiency in place, and that is the major challenge. When we looked into that aspect, I think this is also where we realized that there is a huge potential of saving. All what we are using air conditioning in fans is primarily to cool our walls. That's all what we're trying to do. And then I think there is a very interesting thing that when we looked into that aspect, this is a very important thing. That if two people are living in one room, how much BTUs do they need? And if these BTUs are coming from heating, from electricity, the price goes to XYZ number. And if these BTUs are coming from natural gas, the price is 10 times lower than that, or even more.
Dr.
So,
Mozam,
what is
I'd
the rational
like
decision?
to stop you here,
Please.
and your remaining parts I think would be more relevant for the
I just want to add two more aspects here. I think these are sort of two important aspects that I picked from the action plan that we are going implementation in stage. But I'll just conclude with these two important aspects. First, that we are working in number of 5 sectors, which is that we are working in the transport, building, agriculture, solar power and petroleum, and I think industrial as well. There is, once you are working in number of these sectors with that sort of a priority, minimum resources, we have been also very successful in the previous time that we established this. We already had PICA. We were successful in sort of negotiating and being catalyst for establishing SICA in Sindh, and we also been successful with the Balochistan government for establishing BICA. That and there is these other agencies or people because that's what the effort is ongoing with them. So there is a very extensive engagement. There is, and last point which I really wanted to highlight here. Yes, there is a shortage and lack of financing. We understood that. I think the first thing we looked into that aspect, we have this what I just mentioned about energy conservation fund with us. So now the whole effort in last 6 months is going on to revitalizing and re-establishing this energy conservation fund. I think I have a bare minimum small money, and some of the mechanisms that we have developed and negotiated with the banks, we can definitely see from that small money with the revolving guarantee fund mechanism, we will be able to roll over somewhere around 3.5 billion into the market using the capital from the private banks. So I think there are a number of initiatives going on. There are a number of things currently in process, and I think you can definitely see in coming days their impacts at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muslim, for sharing with us the plans in place. So I think in summary, we can assume that there are adequate plans formally approved by government for enhancing energy efficiency in Pakistan. Having said that, of course, there are legacy problems. For example, the building efficiency codes that Dr. Mozam mentions, they were actually promulgated in 2011 and notified as mandatory. So there's no choice, but no one followed them. So it's much more difficult to revive a failed thing, and new building codes have been proposed, but it's a more difficult space. Electric fans, I think, is much more promising uh, because the mechanisms are well developed. The fan industry, the private sector is very well aligned, very keen to be involved. And finally, for the end consumer, it will save them a lot of money. So it makes sense. And some fan manufacturers have even launched their own program. You can bring an old fan, they will pay you for the old fan and give you a rebated, brand new, highly energy efficient fan. So they're actually even running these programs. So I think with this, I'd like to suggest we move on to a few examples of projects that are ongoing in which they address energy efficiency. So I'd like to call upon a couple of colleagues, Minahil, if you can talk about the building energy efficiency ongoing project. Sajjad Mughal, if you'd like to add something to that, and Mr. Umar Masood, if you'd like to mention something about the Karachi Cooling Action Plan in terms of energy efficiency. I'd like to use that as an example because often energy efficiency will not be a standalone project. It would be an element or component integrated into an existing plan. Minhail?
Different places where we can extract the benefit of energy efficiency. So we did a couple of studies. One was on the building side, and we realized the potential of applying energy efficiency in existing buildings as well as new buildings, and in existing buildings also, like retrofitting public sector building such as schools and hospitals. And for new buildings, we took the potential of low cost housing societies, because they have like standardized designs, and how can, if we implement these energy efficiency mechanisms, how much gains can we get, or how much energy can we conserve in those buildings. So this is one of the World Bank deliverable just that's going to be published soon. Another study was related to the industrial decarbonization and energy efficiency. So when I talk mostly about decarbonization, everyone thinks, oh, it's so far fetched, like we're looking 10 years or 15 years in the future. But when I talk about energy efficiency in the industries, or especially with the industrial sector, they have quick gains because they're saving on their bills, they're saving money, and because they're face the price of especially energy and imported coal prices, so it makes more sense to them. So that's the other study, and we focused on five industrial sector. One was steel, textiles, paper and pulp, fertilizer, and I forget, fertilizer, yes. So these five industries were very intensive on energy consumption, and we realized whether they are consuming energy mostly for generation or is energy in their processes, and then we laid out a roadmap or options for them. So we developed a few near-term solutions, industry-specific, as well as few emerging situations, given where the world is headed. And then we sort of tried to analyze how these solutions that we had identified, what's the cost to them, and why the industry is stagnant, why is there inertia of not implementing those changes within their systems. So we got a number of barriers, like few industries had already used the potential and were in the process of improving their systems, while others didn't believe the numbers. But given the tariff they are facing and the import costs, I think a little push is required for them to convert to these energy efficiency mechanisms. Um, Third thing was on the appliance efficiency. I think Mausam Saab has also mentioned. So we have a lot of stock, especially in the buildings related to fans and LEDs, etc. Now you have seen, like 5 years ago, everyone used to have that bulbs, but now we have converted to LEDs, and those are easily available in the market. There's market knowledge on them. But when you think about fans, though new fans and more efficient fans are available, there's no drive for people to replace their existing stock. So we were developing mechanisms or thinking on creative ways how we can change this existing stock, and like a few of the ways that, like, we still have to be creative and we haven't gone into implementation phase yet, but was like on bin financing, where you can target poor consumers, for example, or giving, like, incentivizing them, or having some voluntary approaches, because we saw that mandatory approaches didn't work. So these were a few work that has been going on at the World Bank. I'll stop here if anyone wants to add on that.
So before, Sajad, you'd like to add something? But before you do that, let me just elaborate a little more on this on-bill financing point that Minahil has raised, because it's really a critical point and one of those things that can be done. It and the government can take it up as a policy measure. I don't know if someone from NEPRA is here. Huh? Hey. So, so we can come to that later, but just park it in your head and think about it when we come to recommendations. That the regulator for a utility like electricity, it's NEPRA, and for gas, it's OGRA. OGRA already has an approved mechanism of on-bill financing for energy efficiency measures. So you can buy a solar water heater, you can get a thermostat for your gas water heater, and you don't have to pay anything upfront. They will adjust it in your bill over 6 months, 12 months, or longer, depending on whatever the consumer says. So it becomes a much easier decision. So that is what has been recommended by NICA, by the World Bank project, that only energy efficiency labeled appliances should be allowed for on-bill financing through the utility bill. But obviously, discos cannot do it themselves. NEPRA has to allow it to happen. And Janzeb Saab had promised to move the case to NEPRA, I think 10 months ago, so I don't know how far it is. But that's something that will really unlock the adoption of energy efficient appliances. The one thing we have to guard against is that no political maneuvering or influencing should allow on-bill financing of non-labeled products. Because if you allow that, then it'll become a huge mess. So, but we'll come to that later, and we'll request NEPRA to respond.
I just want to add 2 points here. I think Minail just mentioned Pakistan is one of those countries who have banned the incandescent bulb production in Pakistan. That's the first thing. I think second, what you were saying, we have already designed the program that has been already presented to the Prime Minister, and Langdeyal Sahab presented this to the Prime Minister in the recent meeting. And I think there is ongoing work. I mean, all these aspects has already been worked out, and I think we have looked into each and every aspect, and we are finalizing. And I think we're also aware of it that we have very extensive discussion, and And I think we also worked with GFC to roll out this initial program with their own effort. So I think this is a big program that is already finalized, and we will be definitely implementing it soon.
Ji Sajjad sir.
Thank you. Um, I think Dr. Moazzam set out, in fact, where the bang for the buck is, and also highlighted the areas where the most efficiencies are persistently existing. But I want to draw attention from a policy perspective, which also have a business implication and which also have a foreign exchange implication for this country, and also the export growth. We're just forgetting that the GHG emissions is in Pakistan, various estimates and various studies, even including our own, the 77% is locked only in energy efficiency. So we can reduce them dramatically by just adopting energy efficiency measures. And when we are talking about manufacturing, it has become already a reality for us, because if you look at the export growth profile of this country, the more than tripled or quadrupled over 10 years to European Union. And the European Union as a region is the most robust one in terms of implementing legislations and also regulations which are curtailing GHG emissions. So there is a big push from their local companies or manufacturers, since we are in fact subject to these regulations where we have to cut emissions, GHG emissions. Any imports that are coming in from other countries are not subject to those stringent standards. As a result, they can produce cheaper and dirtier, whereas we are subject to those regulation. That's why here comes the carbon taxation and its rationale behind it, where the Europe and our export dependence to that region, in fact, is coming to reality very, very soon. So, do we GPS Plus status only gave us a tariff, which gave us a 10% additional advantage in terms of a pricing and a costing? So we became competitive, and now we have an established, we are a part of international supply chains where we are able to export more so in textiles. 2 or 3 years going forward, if we don't reduce our GHG emissions, that's why I said energy efficiency is 78% of the equation in terms of a reducing GHG emissions through energy efficiency. So it is a real thing for the exporters. It is a real thing for the manufacturers or all those emerging export-oriented sectors in Pakistan. So that is also a business case. Whereas we have already shown on the screen a while ago where the most low-hanging fruit is. What are those technologies? Our initial understanding when we were doing a scoping, when we were conducting those from a building perspective as well as from an industrial perspective, we realized that a good portion of energy efficiency technologies are locally produced as well. Whereas the cutting edge, where you need to go to a next level, where the air and energy management systems are required as an integrated solution, this is where we need some imported component services and everything else. But this basic fabrication, which can baseline service, can provide it to the industry, is available. And I also went to Karachi and visited those in Faisalabad and also in Sialkot, those export oriented units. And I was amazed to see the level of compliance they have achieved within this nation, this country. So the policy recommendation needs to focus into two things. A, where the growth can come. Can we secure our future growth plus exports? Because that is a double focus of the policy incentive, because that on one side addresses our foreign exchange and current account a deficit issue. On the other hand, it also shows that this economy can grow for a foreseeable future, so that our GDP starts in real terms growing as well. Energy efficiency becomes a very, very significant and integral part of that equation. There is no I would say, a question about it that we can turn our face around and think that it will go away. It is going to happen in next 2 years. Carbon taxation is going to come, and 70% low hanging fruit is in an energy efficiency and also mainstreaming it. I also looked at that the big corporates have their corporate lines which are available, but the public sector financing and the crowding out effect and the plus disincentive associated with the medium ticket size loans, because interestingly here in Pakistan these are equipment financing to the sim or a consumer finance. On a credit card you can go and buy a good efficient fan. This is a consumer finance. So it is not about banking doesn't know how to finance them. At the end of the day, HAVC system is replaced or a boiler is replaced, heat exchangers are replaced or something like that. There is some real goods out there. There is no collateral issue either. What needs to be done is the policy direction which focuses energy efficiency at a center of it, knits a economic sense around it, runs the number, and then roll out a plan which provides access to the necessary skills, technologies, investment, and financing. So these are the three, in fact, integral component of part of any policy approach. It needs to look at the technology, it needs to look at the skill set available within the country, which can mainstream those technologies, whether it is a housing or industrial sector, and where is the availability of necessary investment or financing in the system.
Thank you, Sajad. I mean, this point goes more to the recommendation, but Sajad highlighted a key point that for energy efficiency improvements, if it's an appliance, then the decision making is fairly straightforward. If it is about, let's say, replacing the air conditioning for the World Bank building, it is not an easy decision. It requires technical know-how as well. So often energy efficiency financing has to be coupled with the technical assistance program. So in the World Bank buildings project, there's foreseen that there should be a technical cell, whether in government or private sector, that helps satisfy both the financier, the bank, as well as the recipient, the end user of its benefits. Want to make a point?
Excellent discussion on energy efficiency and environmental sustainability. Um, I I'm following this conversation, and we talk a lot about financing. We talk about investment, and I am wondering if there is a challenge for some groups of the population. I'm thinking about poorer households, but maybe also some types of of firms to manage these investments. Yes, in the long term, many of these investments are likely to going to be beneficial. They're going to reduce your cost of energy on the household and on the firm level. But the initial fixed cost to finance these investments seems to be a binding constraint for many households to move into the space. So as we are thinking about energy efficiency, and I'm not calling for another subsidy program, I think we would need to be at least aware of the fact that there could be significant challenges for some actors to participate. And I'm wondering which role policy can play, which design of programs is necessary, also thinking about the right balance between private and public sector in order to make it happen and make it happen in an inclusive way. Thanks.
Thank you for that point. I think this example of on-bill financing, the design deliberately takes into account your point of equity as well as inclusivity. So imagine a poorer household replacing their fan, and it could be rolled out to the lifeline consumers, the lower consumption households. And for them, it's an easier decision because the savings starts as soon as they install the fan, but they don't have to pay the capital upfront. So it speaks to it. It's obviously easier to do for certain things compared to others. Before we move on to Umar Masood Saab, just wanted to maybe clarify the point about carbon tax related to trade, because we've talked about it so many times, and this CBAM that's going to come in Europe. So I just want to explain for people that let's assume this is a pair of gloves. It's moving from Pakistan into Europe. It is likely that by 2026 or later, the manufacturer from Pakistan in their spec sheet will have to say what is the exact embodied carbon it's referred to went into making of those gloves. So it could be 1 kg of CO2, it could be zero point 0.9. And based upon that, if it is below a certain benchmark, there may be no tax. If it is above, then a tax will be imposed proportionate to the extent of carbon embedded in it. Now, some of our companies like Midas Safety, who's a manufacturer of high quality gloves, already specifies that for each pair of gloves. And they have a whole range. One is very low carbon, one is high carbon. So, most of our textiles that are exporting to Europe will have to shift into that. So, I just wanted to explain this point. Sorry? Yes, so then a default value would be imposed and it could work to the detriment of the supplier. Umar Masood Saab, what I'd request is if you can give the example like the Karachi climate plan or any other, where it's not necessarily an energy efficiency project, but how energy efficiency could be integrated.
So about the Karachi Climate Action Plan, that's an interesting story. We are acting as the consultant for the Karachi Climate Action Plan, that is the urban unit. But when we got engaged, we were told that Karachi happens to be the member of C40, so it's pretty much a very influential organization at the global level. And the C40 had decided to kick Karachi out of the membership of the group because they had not completed their climate action plan. All other had, and they had not. So it was more, it was a reputational issue than anything else that the government of Sindh and then the city government of Karachi, got involved into it. Now here I feel, and one thing that you might have noticed about this third session is that it is less turbulent because, I think all of us agree to disagree on the first two sessions, but we agree to agree on the fact that efficiency would do no one harm. So as just, you're bringing in the first. Yes, I think. Mhm.
50 cases against me.
So you are rich.
Okay, so I misread the situation. It was the lunch effect, perhaps, that was that people. Otherwise, the underlying sort of symptoms are still like a persistently disagreeing. But coming back to Karachi, so the Karachi Climate Action Plan is very evidence based because UNDP has designed it such that it has to have an evidence based framework. And the nice thing about it was that the mayor of Karachi committed that he would follow all the processes and the requirements of the Karachi Climate Action Plan. It's a 6 months exercise. I think we are almost near to completing it on time. So here is an example where you have the same old government, the same old local government, the same old urban unit, and things are working. Now, why is it important from an energy efficient point of view? The goal of the plan was to make Karachi a carbon neutral city by 2050. But the idea is that if you are able to reduce GHG emissions, you can also reduce them by efficiency. So they were looking primarily at solid waste, but also how to make more efficient public transport. So this whole idea of fuels and electric vehicles, and the more sort of trickier part, and one thing that the urban unit is very much interested in, is basically building codes and building bylaws. Now that is something that we really do not have an idea. Again, it calls into it which can even make an energy efficient building livable. Now, just by putting together a material requirement that these are energy efficient, these are energy efficient material, and this should be the height of ceiling, and the windows should have tinted glass, so that would also be energy efficient. That could still turn out to be a very ugly building. And the problem is that we have really not come up with sort of merger of architects and engineers to come up with smart solutions or smart designs for building bylaws. And that is very much possible. That is very much within the realm of possibility. It is not rocket science. It's just that we've just not got the right people on the table to do this. Now, while this is because buildings are a stock, and the stock depletes and then the stock would be replaced, it's not going to happen instantly, but that would have a very, very transformative effect as far as energy efficiency is concerned. That's one point that I wanted to make with reference to the Karachi Climate Action Plan. And mind you, Karachi still does not have a master plan. But prior to that, if it has a climate action plan, I think that climate action plan would have a lot of bearing on the master planning of Karachi, which all cities, unfortunately, who have already approved their master plans have had not. So even master planning is bereft of any climate action. Whatever master plans which are being sort of done right now in Pakistan, climate change or climate action plans are definitely not part of it. One final word about the Spika and Nika situations. Once again, I think when you pointed out that whether it is a priority for a government energy efficiency, I think in the case of Punjab, most of us even did not know that there is a Pika. The issue only came up when some of the engineers working in Pika had decided to leave because they were getting better offers elsewhere. So the Pika project came under review, that we need to sort of revise their salaries. And then everybody said what this Pika is, and then they said Pika is related to Nika, and everybody said who is Nika, and they said Nika is the organization which makes all these standards and we implement them. And then the provincial government folks said, then you are a federal government organization and you are not a Pika, you are actually a Nika. So we are not going to revise your salaries. And then they made a committee. I was the convener of that committee, in which we decided that we need to revise their salaries, but they will be given an honorarium and a stipend, but not a salary revision. So this is how a government works. But during that deliberation of the committee, we came to know a lot about Nika and Pika. And issues like labeling, there has been hardly any resistance. These are at the moment there's no politics attached to it. I mean, there are not any vested interests so far. We've not got any 250 cases. So uh, I think this thing can be moved along much more rapidly. I do not see any provincial government issues. It's only an issue of coordination. A better communication strategy, is required, and some addition of capacity in these organizations would go a long, long way, because the numbers which have been shown, even if I take a fraction of them to be right, that would have quite an effect than perhaps trying to work out all the issues that we have had in the prior two sessions. And plus, they also involve local governments in a very, very big way. Energy efficiency cannot be done without local governments' active, participation. Thank you.
So I just want to add one point. एक चीज just want to add one point. We have a voluntary labeling regime for fan available from last 6 7 years, less than 1%. And especially because Punjab government in their mandatory MRS list is asked that all these procurements should be based on that labeled fans. Less than 1% labels has been issued. That is the data available with us. So even in the last government with the PDM, when we were taking it out for the implementation, because PSQCA is involved, NICA is involved, provincial governments. So in the cabinet, they always get extension for the implementation. Even in the last government, when the budget was there, we earlier agreed this is the last time they are getting the extension. But when the budget was announced, they got extension. This is the first time I can tell you that now this is the time we have made it mandatory and we are implementing it. But we still faced this challenge that they were not willing to come on the labeling regime. And I think technically why they are saying, and they're right, because there will be a lead capture. The top 10, 15 manufacturers will get the market share. These smaller out of 350 number people who are cottage based industry, they will be out of the market. And we understand that point. And whatever we are designing in the on bill financing mechanisms, we are sort of thinking of all these, and we were discussing this, that how we can protect them to some extent. But still, this is a question mark. But I think there is a huge sort of influence that they carry.
Uh, so I can take an analogy from urban planning. This is a particular thing about building codes. So if you make very complicated and very sophisticated building codes, only expensive houses get built because it becomes very unaffordable for middle income and poor income to build housing. So in building codes, you have to introduce a flexibility. So when it comes to a labeling sort of a regime, I think depending upon the size of the firm, you'll need to do something that at least they are able to get on board through a registration or something. Do not make it so complicated a regulatory or a labeling requirement that it becomes almost prohibitive to them. Even if they want to become part of it, they're excluded of out of it. This has happened with housing in this country because we did not change our building bylaws to suit different income groups. That's why all housing that you see is premium. It's all expensive housing. You don't see a middle class unit or a low middle class unit in Islamabad, at least in these sectors. Yes. While in labeling, I don't know how they would how they would do it, but in building architecture and making building more efficient, uh, well, there's my grandmother house right next to my house, and it still does not need air conditioning. So you know uh, uh, why can't we sort of revive some of that old architecture? And by the way, architects have been working on this in Lahore for quite some time. Lahore is getting a hotter place to live in, and not everybody can afford to move to a farm outside or on the outskirts of a city. So there are no rules for energy efficient buildings. Absence of rules, number one. There are no rules for retrofitting of buildings. So how can you make existing buildings more energy efficient? New building stock will obviously take on a lot more investment and some time to come online. But what about retrofitting existing building and making them more energy efficient? I mean, these are all areas which are worthy of an exploration, and which I don't think so are of that level of controversy. Like, for example, a labeling regime might lead to some problem, might lead to some firms being shut down. But architecture and spatial bylaws are something much more different. Thank you.
Thank you, Umar Saab, for your comments, and also thank you for saving Pika in your convening role. Okay, so Shehryar Saab, I was going to come to you because I think it will be good that we shift the conversation to the fossil fuel side a bit. And so If you can give some comments regarding energy efficiency opportunities in your sector, and then we'll call in Shahid Saab from Genco to also comment.
So, or whatever it is, in Pakistan. Um, and again, at the risk of repeating myself, something I mentioned briefly in the first session, some of you were there, is that we continue to offer supply side solutions to this whole issue. We are not talking about the demand side issues. We are not talking about how energy is used. What can I, as an individual consumer, do every single day? What changes can I make in my life that are going to have an impact? Yes, there can be prescriptive things that we can do. I mean, get everybody's roofs to be painted white. I mean, it doesn't cost that much, easy to check, via drone, or easy to audit. Simple things. But people's lifestyle and habits have to change. There was an example of Vietnam and how quickly they ramped up their solar power in the previous session. I lived in Vietnam for 4 years. There are social and cultural reasons why Pakistan has not been able to do a lot of the things that so many of these other countries have been able to do it. And that's an elephant in the room that nobody wants to address. They think everything is, if you fix the policy and you fix the rules and you fix the regulations, everything will be okay. It won't. There are cultural changes that need to be brought, habits and thinking patterns that need to change. If you compare the education levels, I mean, we talk about Bangladesh a lot, their education levels are far higher than ours. Vietnam obviously is not a comparison. They were in the 90 plus range percent when I was living there, which was more than 20 years ago. So I think whatever recommendations or prescriptions we give must have social communication, people's habits and thinking needs to change. We as a people are happy to disregard and flout rules and regulations and laws, and we admire people who do that, and we seek to emulate them. And frankly, this is pathetic. But this is who we are. So I think the prescription here has to be very different than it has been, perhaps more organic in some other countries. The other thing is that unfortunately, all of our strategies and everything is being driven by one pillar, and that is save dollars, save imports. That is not a long-term strategy for success for any country. And I don't personally know of any country that has ever succeeded in the long run by saving money. You can't. So this whole focus on dollars and restricting the outflow of dollars and doing anything, and this is having an impact on why the energy efficiency is not getting attention, because this is a very long-term, this is a generational impact situation. The government or the powers to be are not seeing, an impact of any initiative in a month or 2 months or 3 months. So there's no impact. It could be years. Building codes, it'll take decades. I don't know. I may not be in this room or on this earth to see those things implemented. So the reason why it doesn't get attention is that there's no impact. There's no visible, measurable dollar impact of these initiatives. Yes, there are small projects that you can fund, and there are pilots and things like that. There's no scale to this. So the ministers or whoever can't stand up and say, well, we've saved $100 million by doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think this is a long struggle, and we need to communicate this to everybody, that this is not going to be part of your next election cycle. This is generational. And you have to put the building blocks in place for our children's children, not for the people sitting in this room or even their children. This is not going to happen in any meaningful way. Small things, perhaps. Coming now, sorry for the long thing, but I feel really strongly about this. So as far as initiatives in the oil and gas sector are concerned, so one of the main things that we talk about, and with respect to the climate, is the quality of fuel. And so there are 3 components to fuel. One is the very small component of crude oil that is extracted from Pakistan, very small quantity, and refined here in the refineries. The second is the imports, which is the larger part of the fuel mix. And the third, of course, now for the last few years is the smuggling from Iran. The huge quantities of diesel coming. By the way, the diesel from Iran is within the specs of the Ministry of Energy diesel spec. So it's not as if it's poor quality diesel or anything. It is on spec. And when I was at PSO, we did a lot of studies on this and tested various fuels. It's on spec. There's no issue with it. The bigger issue is the local refineries and what they are producing, because they are very old refineries. They are hydro skimming refineries, so a lot of fuel oil was being produced, which was being used in the fuel oil plants, which now are shut down and not being used. So the refineries are working at like 60 or 70% efficiency because they can't run fully, and then the imports don't help. So a new refinery policy for existing refineries was approved a few months ago. And as a result of that, there is a $5 to $6 billion plan in place for all of the refineries to upgrade and expand and increase their capacities. So that would be a major initiative towards reducing the pollutants in the fuel. But obviously, that's $5 to $6 billion. This will all be private sector money, and there's no government giving any money in this. So, and probably money will need to be raised internationally, for which some efforts have started to be made. But this is the sort of the big kahuna in the room, which is this big initiative that the oil and gas industry is taking. I mean, other than that, as far as the engines that are on the road are concerned, I mean, a lot of them, especially the transportation engines, are 20, 30, 40 years old. Those trucks are still running. The engines are highly inefficient. There is no plan to replace them unless they sort of fall apart organically and vanish. Because they are owned by individual transporters who are in the unregulated sector, and so it's not going to really make much of a difference if we try and go after the transportation sector. But the big thing will obviously be the refineries and their upgrades, which will take about 4 or 5 years. Yes and no. Because this is a highly regulated sector. So whenever any investment is involved, the refineries or whatever industry wants to make that investment or needs to make that, wants guarantees, or concessions or whatever it is. So the other side of it is deregulate everything. Let them sort of rise or fall on their own, which is something that many of us have been pushing for, but which I don't think any government, at least in the last 30 years, has really been comfortable with doing. Everybody pays lip service to it, but nothing happens. And so, I mean, the more lip service is still being paid to it. But they're scared of whatever may happen. So, yes, Parco, which is the Park Arab Refinery, mid-country refinery, they do produce, I'd say, Euro 2 standard fuel, which is the country standard for imports. Euro 5 standard, which is the country standard. The southern refineries, which is Pakistan Refinery and National Refinery and Baiko, as well as Attak Refinery up near here, they are not producing that. It's difficult to do because a lot of imports are in there as well. So the imports are on spec, but the local is not. So depending on what the mix of imports versus local production is at that time, the mix would vary. But it's not large. 15. No, we do know when. It will take about 5 years. When all of them will have upgraded and expanded. But yeah, all right.
And that is the power sector. I represent actually the government on thermal power stations. Certainly, I think there's a lot that can be done on the power station for the sake of improving efficiency, which ultimately goes to the goal of climate control. And first of all, I think, as I have seen the very good discussion, one of the best strategy to implement is to tie it with money. If people are going to abide by the rules or they're going to care for the efficiency, they're going to benefit it in terms of money. That is the best solution. Wherever this is absent, including my sector, nobody cares. It's just a sermon. For example, I can quote you very examples. The gas price, for example, maybe your sector, sir. Gas price varies in the country. Some of the local gas has been allotted to certain power stations or is being to textile industry on a cheaper rate for various reasons. There has been a lot of discussion going on WACOG, weighted average cost of gas. It hasn't been approved yet. The problem then comes is that there are certain power station which has been allotted a local gas. That's a cheap gas, maybe at one-fifth the price of the imported LNG. So what happens is that plant is free to burn it at any efficiency it likes. It's still in the merit list of NEPRA. NEPRA doesn't care about efficiency. They only care about the cost at which they will get the electricity. Now, there's a living example that there are plants which are designed to be combined cycle plants, but somehow they have damaged their steam turbine and they are running on open cycle. Just for the sake of audience, the combined cycle power plant is actually two gas turbines, typically two gas turbines. With the exhaust of gas turbines, you run a steam turbine. It becomes so much of free electricity, you can say, that 100 megawatt of gas turbine plus 100 megawatt of another gas turbine can make another 100 megawatt out of just exhaust through a steam turbine. Now, if steam turbine is damaged, you're running these, we call it in open cycle. The efficiency will be drastically reduced. A plant which can run on 60% efficiency, like you have the latest modern plants, Haveli, Bahadar, Palloki, they are the best plants in the world. They can run at 60% efficiency. But if you damage their steam turbine, they come down to 40. That means at least 35% reduction in their efficiency. But if your gas is at the low price, you can still win. Now the situation is one of the plants, or many plants I can tell you, they have got the allotted gas, local gas. Molecule is same. It's the same methane. But they are given a cheap gas, so they can afford even to damage their steam turbine. And they are running. They are running now. They have been running for years. And since the price is still low, even if the efficiency is drastically reduced, they are on the merit list of NEPRA. NEPRA doesn't care. And they are going on. It is still going on. I have seen the plants. I mean, I'm here only for last 1 year. I was in private sector, and when I came over, I was surprised. And nobody cares. Now, if the price of the gas is right, it is right for the same plant and for the Haveli Badar plant, always Haveli Badar will come on the merit list. This plant will never be run. So these guys will ever have to work hard to make it as efficient as the other one, or they will go away. So what has to be done? Now the implementation side, as you have questioned, how you implement this? This has to be actually ingrained into the DNA of the people who are operating it. You have to have competent people. You have to have maybe a proper kind of body. I don't know how you will design it. And it has to be non-government. Frankly speaking, I mean, you want to get the job done, it has to be a non-government organization with some legislation done to have authority to rule over these things. That look what's going on. Similarly, this gas price, just to point out the few, I think you have been to captive power plants, sir. You might have seen there are so many captive power plants running on low efficiency because they just got the cheap gas. They are running on 35%, 32% efficiency. Same gas will produce 60% efficiency. And if you can produce that electricity at the cheaper rate, you will provide it to the industry at a cheaper rate, they will not need to run this inefficient plant. Similarly, the same gas, which is so cheap, if you go to industry, you will see the steam is leaking all over. They don't even have the steam traps. So what is the efficiency of heating? I mean, there's such a big thing going on, and somehow nobody takes a decision. Now, that's one solution I can suggest at least. have the gas price equal, you will see these people running after the engineers that let's see how we can economize it. The bill is coming high. So that is just a very big thing which is happening in the power sector. Plus, now, since we are talking about the climate, all this is leading to the climate, isn't it? So, the other thing that has to be ingrained is to care for the climate. Now, if, for example, there's a furnace oil fire plant which runs at 42% efficiency, now, they can run at 44 as well, but generally 42% efficiency, but it runs on furnace oil. There's a coal power plant which runs at same supercritical plant. They run up to 44% efficiency. Now, which one will you choose? If the fuel price comes down, that has been coming down in the recent past, we were saying, oh, we are going to run the furnace oil plant. In cases where the furnace oil plant and the coal plant brings the electricity at the same price, you have to choose the one which produces less SOx, less NOx. And it will be very surprising for you that a furnace oil fire plant, SOx emissions are above 2000 milligram per annum cube. Whereas the modern coal power plants with FGDs installed, they're less than 200. So what will you choose? Who will make sure they choose the right one? So these are the things I think you have to make a body. Implementation, as you said, that's the most important thing. So, like this plant which I'm talking is still going on. And there are quite a lot which, fortunately, I have been able to shut down. But there was a position because the people on those plants just wanted to run it so that they can save their jobs. I was asked a question by a Senate committee that why don't you run the Kotri power plant? These plants were running on open cycle. Faisalabad plant, gas turbines running on open cycle at 24% efficiency. The same gas would bring 60. So I just calculated that Kotri plant, just I think 160 megawatt total, small turbines, obsolete, old ones. I was told, why don't you run it? So I just calculated that just 160 megawatt plant, if this gas was given to a 60% efficiency plant, it would save about 20 billion rupees a year. I could save all those salaries, pay salaries for maybe 10 years with just 1 year saving. But somehow, what I find is nobody is thinking about it. That is the so unfortunate thing. So maybe World Bank can do. World Bank gives money. They can also say, look, we need some people to implement these things. There has to be an independent body who will examine how the things are run. And they will ensure that they're done right. So there are quite few other things I can say, but I don't want to bore you with other things. But this is what I say. Any questions?
Thank you for that.
Just want to
Ji.
ask one question here. I think it's very important that as per the NICA Act, we have been given this power to sort of prohibit and even summon the people who are not doing energy efficiency. So I think that's the Act provides these powers. But I think at the same time, when I looked into the CPPAG side from the NEPRA standpoint of view, OGRA standpoint of view, and also the electricity policy 2021, a lot of it has been assigned along with this, that the heat rate assessment will be conducted by the CPPAG and I don't know the modalities. So I'm kind of curious, like if I look into that whole energy efficiency space, I have mentioned about these initiatives, but why we are not talking about power and petroleum? Because I can say we are the youngest in the room in terms of when it comes to NEPRA, OGRA, CPPAG and other entities. So it's not the right moment to jump into that side. But I think I'm asking because we have NEPRA and OGRA, NEPRA and CPPAG reference to that because you have the background from that side. So in this room, maybe we can get some input on that. Like, who is responsible in that case to sort out this issue?
No, the issue, as I said, it stems from the anomaly in the gas prices. Neither NIPRA nor CPPAG, nobody can do anything about it.
No, heat rate assessment. Who is the
Heat rate is
responsible?
okay, as I said, they are doing it very fine, but they are not actually giving the dispatch based on heat rate. They are giving dispatch on the base of price. Now, a plant.
Price is a heat rate. Lower the heat rate, better the efficiency, lower the cost.
more the dispatch you have.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, a plant at higher efficiency is burning gas at a very high price.
There are other issues. I'm
That's what
coming
I'm
on that.
saying. The plant at the lower efficiency is burning gas at an extremely low price.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it is more affordable. They will choose this one. They will say, okay, 20% efficiency, we choose this one. It has been happening. Kotri power plant has been shut down only a year ago. It was running at 24% efficiency, but just because it was sanctioned a gas which couldn't be given to anybody else, because another body in the government sanctioned the gas, so they were just running on 24%. Because the cost of gas even at that low efficiency, the cost of energy at that low efficiency was lower than a very high efficient plant burning LNG.
Okay.
That's what is the problem.
So thank you.
Yeah.
ECC does the gas allocations for
Yeah.
different projects historically. Historically, obviously,
I think-
ex-power companies have old allocations going back to the mid-80s, in fact. So these allocations happened before the IPPs became a big thing.
So I think these are very useful comments and obviously very.
I come little.
You
on that,
come a bit
then I
later.
would say that you give space to Abhi Saab to close the situation because he has a big picture to close. A lot of confusions are there. I would try to summarize few things so that at least in the room the rules should be clear. The NEPRA is not system operator. I mean, NEPRA is not a market operator. NEPRA is not power purchaser. NEPRA is not something like so and so, one by one. Sticking more to the, agenda point. The most important is that, like in electricity sector, basically you have the central federation, the primary law, the secondary legislation, when I talk the rules and regulations in coherence, and then you have a tertiary legislations, the codes, the grid codes, market codes, and everything over there. That's the whole control and common shareholding on power generation, transmission, distribution, and supply segment, the centrally controlled. So is the less rate of the provinces and central is there. So on the first point, there is a lot. I appreciate. Mozam Saab's told a lot of framework. Law. Even the act is though powerful, they can call to other autonomous bodies and so and so. So the implementation, I see an issue, and then cohesion with the provincial agencies and all together. Efficiency has a lot to do with that potential, and there's a lot of potential that can be taken. Maybe if we don't see it, the like Shariar Saab said, demand side response is that in the Europe, people are said, take 5 rupees from me, but don't come on the peak. This is the level there, and our level is that one that I don't have an Bijli, I am going to cut you off. I'm in load sheddings and all together. Even I pay the bill on that feeder, so we are 20-30 years back on that side. So demand side responses and all together are the advanced side on the conservation and demand side, but more potential is on the supply side. 42%, 45% average national grid efficiency with auxiliary consumption of 2%. I would go, that is whole regulated regime, and then I would say average efficiency, because Denmark is 35%, Caterpillars is 30%, Waukesha is 28%, because Waukesha you see on the oil and gas fields, it's less efficient, more reliable. It says that efficiency is trade-off between the reliability and then efficiency. So average captive efficiency 27. In country have 6,000 megawatts of the captive, and they use 5% auxiliary. Less efficient, but total unregulated. If we talk into that room, how we bring if I bring my grid tariff on cost of service, is that policy issue, is a regulatory issue? It's a policy issue. Let's end the uniform tariff. I come now, cost of service, my grid cost comes to be 33 rupees, and the one unit produced with 20% efficiency, and it's 20,100 rupee per MMBTU these days, the indigenous gas, then it translates into 35 rupees. So nobody would be interested to run that generator and so bring them on the grid. Bring the 28%, 30% non-efficient 6,000 megawatt demand on the grid, thereby meaning on the grid you have the capacity surplus, and then that is down. So potential lies over there. We need to see. We are the country that we have the load duration curve is that 8,000 and 24,000. This is our, if summer peak is 24,000 and winter is 8,000, so is the load duration curve, so is the price duration curve killing to the everybody. So so from 8 to 24, 16,000 megawatt the capacity that you have put into the grid just to make the peaking load. Energy conservation and
Could I request that, I mean, we now conclude with policy recommendations around.
I'm taking along with that recommendation. So an house will be
including
like
on-bill, how easy will it be for you to allow on-bill financing?
I have noted your point, and that, like Umar has said, it's a lady on that make the retrofitting. Garib, I mean, we are the poor country. I mean, how many think about the persons living into the rural areas and third and so the person who cannot build a house on a lakdi and so, and he always waits for the jo barish aati hai or chhatriyan milti hai or logo behind that one, and we are talking about so R value resistance building code में R value आज का घर our house is too colder in winter, too hotter in summer. There is something problem. That problem translates into 8,000 gigawatt and 24,000. That's your peak. How you can sustain on that one, that need to be looked at that side. 2 weeks before, 25,000 all LEDs and tube lights I replaced in my house, and all together. I was one day sitting with Dr. Fayaz Chaudhary. He's told me that he used to go to the Ontario and he lives there. He said that 10 years, 15 years before, the peak of Ontario was 12,000, let's say 10 gigawatt. 10 years back I went, it came to 9. Because they on demand side, they on billing side and all these incentive they brought from policy side, regulatory side, and then they given such a tariff mechanism through the distribution companies and suppliers and all together. If you go to the efficient consumptions and all together, we will finance you, we will pay you, and so. There are the there is the reason we are adding the capacity to meet the peak, and that peak is for in 8,700 operating hours, for few thousand operating hours. We need to see for that one on that design, and we are shrinking into the industry and commercial, and we are unaffordable grid is leading the off-grid solutions in first, second section. All these are linked, and in that when we see that the grid is 16 cents today, and then off-grid solution for 24/7, 365 days, 16 cents are sufficient to go back. So it's time to end the I think uniform tariff, and grid on cost of service is 33 rupees or something like that one. No one can beat us from that one side. System operation social precisely is how is today's structure. A distribution company that is charging to industry, commercial, and all together brings a revenue requirement to the NEPRA. Let's say it has the wire pole charge, it has the all the power purchase price into that, it has all these investment and acquisition cost, its distribution margin is implies, and all together brings up here. I will build from, let's say, for the next 5 years, 650 billion investment is approved for all 10 distribution companies, 380 billion last week for K Electric. So we are investing in next 5 years, 6 years, $3.5 billion into transmission and distribution. This is the revenue requirement, and that would be translating. So it's a more of that you need to press to the demand, they come to the efficiency. So there has to be a policy framework translated through that one, and then a regulatory framework over there. There's no framework on that's doable, and world is doing on that one that can be done on that side. On refining side, I was in all that cabinet meetings and CCOE minutes. The petroleum policy had gone through 5-10 rounds, and it was 2-3 years exercise and all together. Now Pakistan understand that of down the line 5 years, you don't have a dollar to import the diesel unless you don't go to Euro 5 and all together. For this one, transport is a heavy contributor to that one. I was in NAD when I used to go from Karachi to Urdu Bazaar. That was W11, G11, And after 10 years, when I was going to this other site on MBA, then again was W11 and G11 working there, is still working there. The transport side has been there. Working with the cement sector also, starting from crusher to kiln, that's at 700 degrees centigrade, and then to the milling. Heavy, I mean, all that captive coal, HFO is running on, that need to be more efficient on that one, bring them on the grid and all together. Last but not the least, grid is affordable, make the tariff structure, that is a policy, regulatory and institutional together, do it so that the demand is not defecting you, because the best efficiency now you have in the grid. I mean, nobody has a muscle in captives. You put 1,000 megawatt plant and 62% efficiency. The problem is because ultimately consumer, the industry gets 45 rupees a tariff. Who cares for your 62% generation? That is ultimately translated into a tariff. On the other side, Gencos end their life for 30 years, and the claim with the NEPRA is that when, hey, employees are there, tariff was turned into take and pay, just come as an ancillary and peaking, but that was challenged into the court that no, it need to be a take or pay, because we need to give the salaries and all together. That's the mindset that we as in the country and people have also, because we have to see that holistically. It's not all about, it's a system operator license and 400 pages grid code, how you plan, dispatch and everything, and that is the reason. Final comments. The NEPRA. How soon can we start on bill? Okay. Okay, and the system operations continuously 45 billion every month. The NEPRA is deducting from a CPP side, and then NPCC entity side. What is this? It's a deviation. I mean, you allow a tariff, open cycle, most important, we allowed, that was a 45%. If you have not allowed it, then RFO would have operated. So if you allow the tariff on the open cycle, you say you will only run on the merit order altogether. On bill, let the policy framework to come, and then that can be easily integrated into that one. There is no such I think framework that DISCO, along with their revenue requirement, they can finance to their consumer through bill, and then how can mechanism can work. That's a workable. That's a fair idea. That's in developed countries. It's working there. But on that one, I would Abid Saab can enlighten, because he has a financial background a lot more than me, and then he can enlighten you.
It's coming to the close. And there's just a couple of people I'd like them to add comments. One is Asad Mahmood, because you've worked a lot on energy efficiency, maybe one or two final recommendations. And Dr. Afia from PIDE.
Come up with a long-term policy, or lenders also have to play their role, like in terms of non-performing loans, जितने भी हैं इन पाइपलाइन या पहले आए हैं, तो उससे भी lessons learned जो सामने आते हैं. So we need to look into those things, the institutions, how they can effectively give the performance in terms of getting tangible goals. उनको क्या hand holding चाहिए, because like 18th amendment and federal जो jurisdictions हैं, ये भी एक किस्म का कहीं ना कहीं barrier अभी implementation में आगे जाएंगे, तो इसको साथ साथ address करने की कोशिश की जा रही है, but that needs to be like clearly defined. Thin lines of areas of jurisdictions have to be jotted down, and things have to be made simple, like just like prescriptive approach is the best approach towards efficiency. I think going into too many like technical documentation and things might not serve the purpose, and I think the politicians and the bureaucracy also have to be like they need to look into continuation of policies, like from one government to another government, so that the end stakeholder, be it the industrial sector, be it the like end user, like domestic users. So right now there is a catch-22 situation, even with the normal domestic consumer, that whether they should go for solar or not at this stage. So that also diverts another issue towards building code. For example, you are setting some mandatory RE technology portion into the building code itself. So whether it's going to see the light at the end of the day or not, because that net metering is something already under discussion. So if you embed it with the building code and what whether they are going to be implemented or not, so the flexibility provisions. And there was time, like again, that lending side kept on lending the power generation side, but I think like it's never too late. But the time where we had to focus on the overloaded feeders, now the feeders are getting underloaded because of that massive shift towards RE technologies. Still, there are some there. We need to start off with few pilot projects, make it success, and then replicate, like identify overloaded industrial feeders in across Pakistan, start demand side management programs from there, see the technologies required in those specific feeders, like in Alipur, Faisalabad, Fresco. There are so many cottage industries, looms over there, so mostly running on underloaded capacity, triggering the low power factor, and that's overloading the feeder over there. So how to release the demand in terms of like shop floor solutions. So that is something like where we need to sit and jot down the things. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to what Bhutto Saab just said, what we need to think about is to create a strong link between price and demand. It is the weak link between price and demand which is leading to energy inefficiency in the non-productive sector, specifically the household sector. Secondly, transport is the major energy consuming sector, so we must think about the cost reflective pricing road pricing policy, as well as some car parking fee. These factors could be effective in terms of controlling some sort of private transport. And serious type of fuel rationing in the public sector. Some steps were taken in the past, but these were not effective. So some sort of serious fuel rationing in the public sector should be taken, should be considered. And similarly, on the transport side as well, somebody also mentioned about the city planning. So we must think about broadly in terms of city planning. Overall, the urban planning of the cities is very important in terms of fuel efficiency, in terms of conserving fuel in the transport sector. And I think that's all. Most of the points.
Thank you very much. So we have.
I think I will only just to respond whatever the question which was raised by Muazzam, and the Shahid Sahab will clarify those things. And other thing which I would like to highlight on, do we know that how much a clean energy in 2023 a country grid is providing to the consumer? As per my analysis, which is an evidence-based thing, it's not just an calculation which we have done, the 59% energy which is supplying from the grid to the consumer is clean. And if we want to do 41% to be more clean, the plan which we have approved already, which we are under execution, by 2031, we are going to be 76% clean energy from the grid. So that's one of the fact which we are not considering, the net metering, the off-grid solarizations, and that will have an impact also. And the euro, I am just discussing Mr. Faraz also in the breakout session. This industry has a challenge by having affordability. On one hand, this is a challenge, another to meet certain European standard where there is a carbon tax not complying with that product is produced, how much CO2 they have consumed. So we have, as Muazzam said, a captive nature of textile energy. They have their own diesel generator also, they have a gas generator also, they have all other, I think, mode of adding carbon to their processes when they produce something. If they are today, I'm saying if they are today, they are shifting totally to the grid, they are going to be compliant with whatever the 2023 standards which they have to comply with for the European, not to attract a carbon tax. But the problem is the other things which just Shahid Saab has highlighted, our merit order is based on a price which is set on one hand OGRA and other hand NEPRA. So the primary energy which is feeding into the power plant, quite is oil, quite is gas, quite is RLNG, it is an input cost for the power generators to produce, and we cannot do anything on that account also. So that is where energy regulator or energy ministry has to see what economic benefit out of that overall category are. The things which is in the control of regulator is Muslims have the per unit BTU consumed by a power plant, which is an efficiency of that power plant. That is which is determined by NEPRA based on a heat rate test, which we carried out in heat rate test based on the independent engineer, and then we set a benchmark and we have a heat rate curve set by the manufacturer also to validate certain things. So that's we are doing it successfully, and we are saying that all the IPPs and all are, except for we have challenge for the Gencos, which is a public holding companies. Then what is they are running a power plant based on the heat rate determined by the regulator, but they are actually consuming more than what the regulatory target is. If a 200 gram is set for regulators to consume, but they actually get a dispatch on 200, but they actually consuming a 300 gram for that units. That 100 units is going to be adding to the circular debt, adding to the problem, which is I think not realized yet not. But nevertheless, the Gencos are which are on the gas base are not getting a gas quota which was previously determined, and thus no gas is available in winter. Absolutely, there is a zero gas allocations to those power plant in the winter, and yes, they do get a certain or as available gas in the summer seasons when the consumption is a little bit low, right? And practically they are not getting gas, so they are not being dispatched. This is why I'm saying that 59% energy is now clean from the grid. So that's I think a factor which I want to just clarify. And the on billing this regime, I think the gentleman has very rightly the upfront capital cost is in questions, either who is if a banking system or the donor funding or any fund can be generated to finance that upfront cost of that equipment, efficient equipment with appliances, and rest of the thing I think will not going to be any issues, because when I was in CFO LESCO, I have offered these schemes to my all employees. Just go and get the bank loan, and I will guarantee a bank through a recovery through the pay bill and all these things to ensure that they will be not out of pocket because of the default of not payment of any of that. And similar mechanism I think would be introduced, as Bhutta Sahab said, if a policy direction is going to be there and the mechanism for upfront financing of those costs, and the benefit is obviously going to be shared between the consumer and obviously to the utility sector for managing such a things, I think will not going to be an issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you. It's going to be very difficult for me to attempt to summarize the discussions today, so I won't. But we will write it up. We've been recording it, and we will put out a note based on the three sessions and the major points that came out of those. This workshop is the next stage of an initiative that we started at the IGC, and then the World Bank joined with us on this initiative, which is to sort of setting the agenda on climate change. The approach so far, the mode of engagement on policy reform by most donors and others has been find a champion in the government, get your best team out, talk to the champion in the government, and the government will take up whatever policy agenda you set for it. You World Bank backs it up with money, we back it up with more talk, and somehow things get done. And this has worked very well. It worked very well with the IGC, although we don't give any money, but we do pay the all the research costs for the teams that work on specific topics. We were able to find interested young civil servants at the provincial level and some senior civil servants at the federal level who valued advice based on rigorous evidence that the IGC teams did, and of course the World Bank comes with its own advice on various issues backed by money. But on climate change, we felt that we needed to move away from that mode, and we needed to really create some kind of a consensus among key stakeholders on what the core issues are that need to be focused on. And after preliminary discussions, we agreed that there are at least three important core issues. One is food security and water. Climate change will have an effect on that. So we had series of workshops where we brought in not just the government, but also people from the private sector, farmers, researchers based in universities, international researchers, to discuss what the challenges for water and food security will be. The other core element was cities, and here again we had a series of workshops on how cities will be affected by climate change, and again, what will be the principal issues that cities will have to manage. Uh, we had series of conversations on that, and we put out a policy note on what the issues are. This workshop is the third topic, which is energy and climate change. And the three sessions were designed in order to address the key issues that will come up. And the team will put out a policy note, which will be the next step going forward. I myself was fascinated by the discussions. You know, governance failure is a black box. You don't really know what people mean. Some people mean it's corruption. Some people mean it's incompetence. But what I learned today is a massive policy coordination failure. Yeah, we have competent people, and it's not clear to me that we just assume that they are corrupt. But it seems that the right hand doesn't talk to the left hand, and at some level, this coordination is not happening in Pakistan. And I suspect that this transition happened maybe 20, 30 years ago. Because if you look through the kind of policy reform that happened and the implementation that happened right up to the 80s, you don't see this. You don't see Pakistan being talked about as a failed state. The earlier concessional financing that came to Pakistan in the 60s and the 70s, the growth impact of that funding, the export impact of that funding was substantial. Institutional reform that took place was very impressive. If you look at some of the literature of that period of Pakistan's performance, you see all of these things being listed. Naved and I did a paper on aid to Pakistan in the 80s, and we were able to list with a great deal of confidence the institutional impact that aid had. But somehow, since the mid 80s, since the 90s, it's been a downward drift. Is it our engagement in Afghanistan? I don't know. Is it easy money since the engagement in Pakistan? I don't know. Is it because a large number of poor people who would otherwise come on the streets and taken us by our throats? Is it because they have found remittances as a way out and therefore are not coming out on the streets? I don't know. But all of these factors are clearly there. But then the net result, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as today's discussions are concerned, is that on the policy implementation side, there is a massive policy coordination failure that nobody has even started to grasp. And how, A, why does it happen? And B, what to do about it. Uh, the policy coordination failures that we heard today in the discussion, we'll try and capture some of it in the policy note that we prepare. Uh, and then as we move forward, we will try to address how these coordination failures can be addressed going forward. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much, World Bank, for this terrific partnership in agenda setting mode of engagement. Thank you.